What's up YouTube? So today I am going to do a video on a formula that I found on the internet. So I was looking at Perfume Flavorist magazine, which is an online website, and they do online articles, but they also have a magazine, and it's basically a load of stuff about perfume, the perfume industry and flavor industry. I'll leave a link in the description if you're interested, so definitely go check it out. But they had a link the other day to an article which is like one of their legacy articles, so one that was written ages ago, and the article was called Woody Notes in Perfumery Part 3, Cedarwood Derivatives in Soap Fragrance. Basically what the article was about was the different ways in which cedarwood can be used in making fragrances for soaps. Now the interesting thing about the article is that it included a load of traditional formulas in the article. One caught my eye because I actually thought, oh, I think I have the ingredients for that. Normally, like when you're looking online for formulas, or if you end up seeing formulas in books, or I find that I don't really have the ingredients, but this formula had quite common ingredients which I pretty much had. So I decided to go and make it, and I'll also leave a link to the article if you want to see the other formulas that were in the article, if you want to go and make any of those. And yeah, before I begin, this is actually the first time I've made a formula that I've found, written by someone else or online. There are a couple of key points that I want to make about that. If you find a formula and then you go and make it, that's fine. You've got a bottle of stuff which smells nice. You don't necessarily understand the formula. You don't necessarily know why it is how it is. And if you want to become a better perfumer, obviously, like quite a key skill is actually understanding how the ingredients work with each other. It's not to say that you can't learn anything from making formulas. It's more to say that if you just go and make a formula, it's unlikely that you'll actually become a better perfumer. However, that said, there are ways you can use it to your advantage. So one technique, for example, is you could make a formula, you could then go and leave it for 2 weeks and then forget what was in it, and then you could smell it and then try to work out back from first principles what was in it and reconstruct it. That's a really good exercise for understanding how to kind of make things and how ingredients work together. Another thing you could do is you can make a formula and then you could deconstruct it by slowly removing ingredients one at a time, and in doing so you'll end up finding out the effect of those ingredients on the formula. So you'll kind of work out what they're actually doing, what their role is in the formula. It's a little bit like, say you were doing photography, so you went on one of those photo guide tours where you have like a photo guide and they tell you how to take all the best pictures. So they take you up a mountain or something and they stand you in a spot and then they tell you what settings to use on your camera, and then all you have to do is stand there and press the shutter. And you've got this amazing picture, which is great, but it doesn't mean that then you can now go to any other mountain and magically have an amazing picture again, because you don't necessarily know exactly how to work out the best place to stand, or what time of day you need to go to get the best lighting, or maybe you don't know what settings are best on the camera. So it's kind of the same thing here. So the formula that I found was called chypre number 7. Now, if you don't know what a chypre is, chypre or chypre is French for the island of Cyprus, and it's a traditional family of perfumes, and they're basically built around patchouli, labdanum, bergamot and oak moss. And that perfume family is massive. It's been going for a very long time, but it's quite a traditional approach to things. Interestingly, the formula that I had, called chypre number 7, doesn't actually have all of those elements. It doesn't have the labdanum and it doesn't have the bergamot. Now, if you do look at the formula, what it does have is lavender, coumarine and oak moss. And these 3 ingredients often are combined together to make something which is called a fougère, which means fern in French, which is another traditional fragrance family. So weirdly, even though this formula is named chypre, it's kind of a fougère. But doesn't really matter because those 2 classes of families can often overlap. It doesn't really matter. It's mainly getting an idea of what rough olfactory territory you're in. Oh, another thing I would like to note is that I was actually meant to have citronella in this formula, but I don't have any citronella. It was the one thing I don't have. But what I did was I looked at the constituents online for citronella, and I did have some of the major ingredients. So what I did was worked out the same proportions of those ingredients that would have been in the citronella if I'd actually used citronella, and I used them instead of the citronella. So it was kind of making a fake citronella. But yeah, what it basically meant was I had a bit of geraniol, a bit of geranyl acetate, and a bit of citronellol. There are other things obviously in it, but that's what I had, so I tried it. The other thing is I use clearwood, which is kind of a patchouli replacer. So I'm making this perfume here, and what I've done is I've got all of the ingredients. The only difference is I've pre-diluted them to 10%. All I'm doing is weighing them out in the proportions given by the formula, and then I'm mixing them together. I'm using a fresh pipette for each one because obviously I don't want to contaminate the ingredients with one another, but yeah, that's it really. It's quite simple. So by having everything at 10% concentration, it makes it so everything is still in proportion to each other. So now I've got the perfume here that I made. I'm not going to evaluate it straight away, but so basically what I'm going to do is give my nose a chance to rest. Before I tell you what it was like, I'm going to go over some of the synthetic ingredients in here, because if you look at the formula, I've covered a lot of the naturals in some of my other videos on naturals, but I've never really talked about the synthetics particularly. There are 5 main ones here. It's amyl salicylate, beta-ionone, lindenol or terpineol. They're both different names for the same thing. Benzyl acetate and terpineal acetate. Yeah, so I evaluated all of these at 10%. Just to give you a rough idea of what they smell like. So amyl salicylate, that's something that I find smells very soapy. It's quite, it's a bit powdery. It's kind of bright though and kind of clean as well. Beta-ionone, again, that lasts quite a while. It lasts more than 12 hours. This is very, very diffusive. So even at 10% or even much lower, you'll open the bottle and you'll immediately be hit with the smell. The smell is kind of like a woody violet kind of smell, I would say. It's also quite powdery. At 10% honestly is too strong. It's something that smells really, really nice, I find personally, and it's used in a lot of different things. It's used in things like raspberry accords. If you want to make a violet accord, you would use it, or something like Parma Violet Sweets, you could use it. The one thing about ionones is that they fatigue your nose very quickly, so you only have to take a few smells before you effectively become kind of blind to smelling them for a bit, and then you need to get a bit of fresh air before you can smell them again. So there's one important thing to note. Benzyl acetate, that's a bit weird. I found it smells kind of like solvents and glue. Not particularly nice on its own, but it's used a lot in jasmine accords, so I guess it's more of a floral kind of thing. There's terpineal acetate. So you'll find a lot of aroma chemicals with an acetate group can smell quite similar because of the acetate group. So there's things like geranyl acetate, for example, that I find smell quite similar to terpineal acetate. But basically, it's quite a chemical smell, though I would say it's maybe a little bit kind of fruity as well. Maybe a little bit floral, it's quite hard to define. And then finally, terpineol or lindenol, it's got various names. Like a lot of aroma chemicals have different names, so it doesn't really matter which one you want to use. To me, this smells like kind of, it's kind of like, for me, when I go out sometimes for a walk in spring, there are these certain kind of foliage you find, which don't smell actually particularly nice, but it's still kind of a kind of spring foliage nonetheless, and it smells just like that. I don't know how else to describe it. So now for the actual formula itself. So I found that initially it smells quite strongly of the the ionone, the kind of violet, and the kind of woodiness of the cedarwood, which is quite nice. And though also the amyl salicylate, that kind of soapiness is quite prominent as well. So it does smell very soapy. It wouldn't be something maybe I would expect in like a kind of a normal commercial perfume that you would use to spray on yourself. One thing that is quite interesting is it reminds me very much of a shampoo that I used when I was in Croatia one time. Then I evaluated it, I left it a bit longer and see how it evolved. I found that actually over time this formula got a bit nicer, it got more balanced. So initially it did smell a little bit weird maybe, but as the time went on and as the base notes kind of developed, it definitely got a bit nicer. So I think this is something I find quite a lot in traditional perfumery and older perfumes I smell. they seem to be a lot more focused on the base notes smelling really, really nice. Whereas sometimes in more modern perfumes, I find there's more of a focus on the top note. I don't know if that's just me or if that is actually true. So anyway, the other thing I did was try it on the skin, because obviously it's important because things always change on the skin. On the skin, I would say at the beginning it definitely doesn't smell too great at all. It really, really strongly smells of the coumarin. The coumarin is something that it smells a bit like, I would say it smells like Play-Doh. It kind of has a sweetness to it, but it also has a spiciness to it. Though I'm not sure if that's actually a spiciness or just because it's an allergen that it just feels a bit sharp, you know, because of that. So I'm not sure, but coumarin, it's really hard to describe without smelling it, but it's a very common material. So if you don't have it, I would recommend you get some just so you know what it's like. Yeah, it smelled really strongly of coumarin to begin with. However, over time it did evolve and the powdery kind of woody violetness came out and it started to smell nicer after time. Though it does still smell very soapy. It's definitely a soapy thing. I would be interested to know how it would change if you put it in a soap base. So normally you would use ethanol as your solvent, which is what I would do, especially if you're focused on making regular perfumes. Though the perfumers who would make soaps and shampoos and that kind of thing, they would use actually a soap base to do all of their evaluations in, because obviously things can change in a different base, how they smell, so you always want to be using the base of the end product to get the best idea of how it's actually going to smell in use, right? One final thing about this formula is that the beta-ionione, so you know that thing I said causes olfactory fatigue, that does affect how it smells, because the first time you smell it on the strip or on your skin, it generally smells nicer because all that violet kind ofness, the violety elements are there. And then when the beta-ionione, when your nose has got a bit more used to that after a few smells, that's no longer kind of visible. So essentially the rest of the formula has to go on without it as such. Basically, the more you smell it, the worse it gets, kind of, I think at least anyway. Anyway, next I tried some blends. So, well, when I say blends, I didn't actually mix it with the other thing, which is a good thing to do, but what I did was the cheat way, which is, so say you take your scent strip and you dip another scent strip in something else, you can then hold them both together. And if you smell them like this, so smell them close together, then you can actually effectively see what it would smell like if you mix them together. But it saves you all of the trouble of actually mixing them together. So as long as you make sure the concentrations are kind of comparable, by doing that, one won't overpower the other too much and you'll kind of get a rough idea of if you want to blend them. Another thing you can do is if one's a bit stronger, you can put the strong one a bit further away when you smell it. So that means that overall it kind of balances. So you smell less of the one further away, but because it's stronger, that means overall you smell both of them are about the same, if that makes sense. So I blended it with the amber accord that I made in the last video. That was a good combination. Part of the thing that's interesting about it is the amber accord that I made last time had bergamot and labdanum in it. And as I said before, this perfume was meant to be a chypre, but it was actually missing the bergamot and the labdanum. So by combining it with the amber accord, it kind of made it into more of a traditional chypre. And I think it definitely worked very well. I think the bergamot helped cover up some of the not so nice bits at the start of this perfume, and also the labdanum worked really, really well to kind of round out the base and make it a bit more luxurious. I also tried it with orange, and I also tried it with lemon. Unsurprisingly, both of these worked fairly well because they're both top notes, which smell quite nice, so generally they work with most things. I think lemon blended better with this than orange. The other thing I did was I thought, well, okay, for me the nicest parts of this fragrance are the cedarwood and the kind of violet effect. So would it be difficult to maybe make a cedarwood and a violet accord? I don't have a violet accord yet, I haven't ever got to making one, though that is something that I think would be cool to do at some point. I thought maybe I can just use the cedarwood and the beta-ionione and see if those blend together well. So I blended those two together at some different concentrations, and what I found was, yeah, actually the similar concentrations or similar proportions to what was in this formula actually balance quite well. But the problem was, yeah, it smells nice and all, but it doesn't smell like cedarwood and violet. It just smells like cedarwood and beta iron. What it made me realize was there are other elements at play in this formula that are actually helping to give a bit more of a violet effect. I then tried blending kind of some other of the chemicals that were in the formula with it, with these mix of beta iron and cedarwood, to see if I could find something that smelled a bit more violet-y. But none of the combinations that I tried actually made a good kind of violet cedarwood impression. So yeah, I think that will be definitely a good project. Violet accord, and then maybe one day a violet and cedarwood accord. So yeah, yeah, this video didn't achieve loads, to be honest. I didn't really achieve that much with the formula, though it was definitely interesting to smell it and just to kind of get an idea for that kind of smell and what that kind of formula smells like. And also the idea of using cedarwood as kind of the main constituent of a formula, that I found quite interesting. And also the idea of cedarwood and violet together, I thought that was quite nice. The main thing is you guys have got this formula and you've also got the link for the other formulas. So if you're interested in making some of these more traditional formulas, feel free to go and try them out. And that's it from me. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. And yeah, that's it. So feel free to give me a like or a subscribe, and yeah, see you next time.